I think one of the biggest things that I've realized with Caribbean individuals, Caribbean folk around mental health and therapy is that we literally, like in our dialect, don't have language for mental health. The language we have is Dagyo mad.
Yeah, everything is crazy. Everything is somebody's a crazy person.
She mad, she's sick, they will be that's that is the language that we have for mental health and mental illness, right? And so I think one of the biggest things that I really focus on, particularly like I work with youth a lot as well. So like it's also working with the youth, but also giving their parents context. Because a lot of times they're like first gen Canadian. And so they're hearing all of this mental health, they're on TikTok and they're hearing all this mental health language and they're self-diagnosing themselves, but that's a whole nother topic. But then their parents don't have the language.
Welcome back to another episode of In We Blood, the podcast that's dedicated to help reignite an appreciation for Caribbean culture and traditions throughout the diaspora. Today, I am here with the lovely Breanna Chanelle, social worker, psychotherapist.
Yes.
You know, what I really wanted to talk about is therapy and the Caribbean community. I want to start off with kind of like my own anecdote is just like the thought of therapists being scary because we always have this idea that we have to be private and like that's our business and like don't tell anybody your business and like everything is like a private thing. So what would you say has been your experience, I guess, with the Caribbean community, I guess kind of embracing or maybe shying away from therapy?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you said, that whole idea of like, we had to keep the business in the house, don't go outside with my business, don't embarrass me, all these things. And so I do find that generally speaking, even Caribbean people who choose therapy, they're still somewhat like distrusting. And so I have to be very intentional about how I service them, how upfront I am with like everything that's happening. So when we're doing forums, explaining to them everything that's happening in the forums, explaining to them like, this is when, you know, I will have a duty to report. This is when, and so just being upfront with every single detail of therapy, I think helps to build that trust, and also being understanding of the history of why that distrust exists, right? Knowing that as Caribbean individuals, particularly Afro-Caribbean individuals, we are coming from literally being captured, enslaved, and brought to an island, and all of the things that happened to us in enslavement while we were on that island and continue to happen after due to colonization has bred a lot of distrust in systems, and therapy, social work, all that is a system. I think one of the biggest things that I've realized with Caribbean individuals, Caribbean folk around mental health and therapy is that we literally, like in our dialect, don't have language for mental health. The language we have is Dagyo mad.
Yeah, everything is crazy. Everything is somebody's a crazy person.
She mad, she's sick, they will be that is the language that we have for mental health and mental illness, right? And so I think one of the biggest things that I really focus on, particularly like I work with youth a lot as well. So like it's also working with the youth, but also giving their parents context. Because a lot of times they're like first gen Canadian. And so they're hearing all of this mental health, they're on TikTok, and they're hearing all this mental health language and they're self-diagnosing themselves, but that's a whole nother topic. But then their parents don't have the language. And so then it's this
disconnect.
Exactly. And so something that I'm intentional about, particularly with youth clients, is making sure that I offer to their parents, like we can have check-ins. I'm not able to tell you exactly what your child is saying in therapy, but we can check in to be like, how is my child doing? What are the general topics we're covering? So that they know that I'm not taking a child and just doing anything.
Yeah. And I think, and one of the things too that parents will feel more comfortable with, because I've seen this myself, is just kind of like not feeling like, again, with the distrusting of systems, is not feeling like you don't want to send, specifically as it relates to youth and child therapy, you don't want to send your child to a white therapist. Because it's like there's so many things that they don't understand. Yeah. And it's like you want to have somebody who gets it. Yeah. Right. So can you speak a little bit to that with maybe some experiences you've had with your clients?
Absolutely. So along with being a therapist, I've also like worked in youth work for like a decade. I just recently left a position where I was working for a school board. So one of the biggest things is that when it comes to like child welfare, right? I think one of the biggest fears with Black parents, Caribbean parents, Afro parents, with having someone who is not understanding of the culture is the fear that my child's going to say something and they're going to call CAS.
Yes. So CAS for people listening in the States, what's the equivalent in the States?
It's just Child Protective Services.
Right.
Yes.
Where they're going to come and take my child from me because they don't understand what's going on here.
Exactly.
That's definitely a real fear. It's a real fear.
A reasonable fear. It's a reasonable fear because when we look at statistics about who those calls are being made on, it's the majority of them are Black children. There's statistics that prove that we are overrepresented in child welfare. There's statistics that prove that when there is an investigation happening, that our children are more likely to be placed outside of the home while those investigations are happening in comparison to our white counterparts. And so that fear is not coming from nowhere. It's coming from legit experiences, and there is statistics to back that up.
What are some certain topics or maybe something that you wanted to talk about?
I think one of the things that we need to talk about is the fact that Caribbean people ignore their pain and their emotional trauma, and they don't share their stories.
Okay.
Which leads to perpetuating the same stories over and over and over again.
Let's get into that, because it's true. I some of the things that I realize is, particularly as it relates to like, not necessarily my mom. My mom's very open, very transparent, but like my mom's mom or like the older generations, they're very like, they have stories and experiences and things that they've gone through that they'll never ever open up and say, not to us necessarily, but like to anybody. You know what I mean? And there's certain things they're taking to their grave. Right?
Yeah. And I think that we, like I said, once again, like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, we tired of hearing of the slave history, but it's a part of our history. And in order for us to understand why our culture looks the way it does, we actually do have to go back in history. And so when we think about the reality of like, as a slave, to show pain meant that like, that means that I am not worth anything, because if I am in pain or if I am sick, I can't work. And everything, my entire existence, my entire value is based off of my worth to my slave master. And so I have to hide when I'm in pain. I have to hide when I'm sick. I have to hide when anything, is happening to me, because if I don't hide it, that means that my life is on the line. Right. And I think that has been perpetuated, where it's like, you just suck it up and move on. Suck it up and move on. Even we tell it to kids, like, what are you crying for? You're a big boy. Don't cry. Why can't I cry? I can still be a big boy and cry. I can still be a big girl and cry. But I think that we've learned that in order to push through and in order to be okay, quote unquote, be okay, we should just hide everything that we're going through and act as if everything is okay. And I think something that people love about Caribbean people is like, we're so like, oh, like, we're just happy to have life. Thank God for life. Thank God for, like, just a little bit. It sounds nice because it's like, oh, they're so appreciative. But I struggle with it because I feel like we're complacent, where it's like, just life is enough. Like, no, we don't. Just life is nice and we're grateful for that. But why is the bare minimum our expectation when we could have so much more, right? But when your options have at one point been less than life, then yeah, you're going to be like, I'm just grateful for life.
Good point. And like, how often do you see that come up? Well, maybe this might be like more private, but if you can kind of generalize, like, how often are you seeing, I guess, these mindsets showing up with people that you're working with, and what does that look like in day to day? Yeah,
it shows up every single day when clients are, it's so funny because I recently had a conversation with someone about the reality of like how we intellectualize our feelings. So like, we tell stories from like a very matter of fact point, like, okay, this is what happened, but that's life, and so you just got to move on. That is like something that I see with so many of my clients, and they tell stories from their head, but they don't tell stories from their heart. And I think that oftentimes it's difficult to tell stories from our heart because that means we have to face what we're actually feeling, and sometimes it's very uncomfortable. And it's also very uncomfortable when you have been raised in families where adults didn't show you what to do with the things that you're feeling. So if my grandma never told her stories and only cried in corners where I couldn't see her, then I'm learning that my emotions need to be done in places where people can't see it. And so what do I do with it?
Let's talk a little bit about shame. Because I know that's something that you and I have had conversations about before. But it's very much like a crippling thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you start to realize that people think like, oh, like, it's just my business, or what did you say? Like, pride is it comes from shame. When people are too proud to do whatever. No, like, that actually comes from shame.
Yep.
And a lot of times we see a lot of pride in different areas, like, oh, I'm too proud to whatever. I saw somebody say the other day, she was like, talking about how when they were younger, they had to scrub and shine the floors. She was like, poor people are very proud people. So it's interesting that when you kind of have like, you're talking about like having certain language and stuff like that, but it's like thinking about like the relationship between like pride and shame and realizing, wait a minute, this is all stemming from the same thing.
Yeah. And it's interesting because one thing that Caribbean people always say, well, that they don't have shame. They don't have shame.
The policing of society is shame. She not no shame. What she size. She not no shame. Watch her clothes she putting on.
And so we've literally internalized this idea that shame is a metric for your value or for, what you're worth in society. If you have shame, if you experience shame, that means that you are uppity. If you don't have no shame, that means that you are
low class.
Right? And oftentimes when they say you don't have shame, it's speaking about somebody's vulnerability, right? Like they didn't hide certain things. And so that means they don't have no shame, right? You go outside, your hair not braided, you don't have no shame. No, like this is just how my hair grows out of my head. Like, let me live, please. Right?
It's true.
Yeah. And I think that like shame, I mean, when we think about once again history and the way in which shame, it has been and continues to be used as a form of like keeping people in line, right? Like, okay, women, I'm going to shave off your head when you don't behave the way that we need you to behave, which is what slave masters did. Men, I'm going to castrate you in front of your family members. Shame. Whippings in front of you bring the whole yard together and you watch somebody whip them. You hang someone from a tree, lynching. That's all shame. That's all tactics of shame. And sad
fear.
And fear, exactly. And the sad part is that we have taken a lot of those things and inputted them into our parenting styles.
One of the things that I heard you mentioning was you were like, Thanksgiving is coming up. Stop watching the children and then play it.
Period.
Because you're giving them body image issues.
Yep.
And I had to look at myself and be like, oh my God, I'm one of those people. I'm policing the plates because I'm a licorice my damn self.
Not licorice.
And I want more. But it's so crazy. Like I never even thought about the impact of that.
I've had clients literally come to me and cry because they're so anxious about Thanksgiving, because they're so anxious about Christmas, because they're so anxious about Easter, because they feel like they can't eat in front of family without feeling like everybody's watching what they're putting on their plate. Girl, you think you don't see a size, you don't find you shouldn't be eating that? Girl, more again?
It's not funny, but it's just so real.
It's very real.
And it's just so raw because we always say Caribbean people don't have no filter.
They don't. And it's disgusting and it needs to stop.
It actually impacts people because when I read the comments and stuff and it's like, hi, like Easter is coming up. The greeting should not be, hey girl, you get fat.
Like, listen, when I love my family. Let me just put it out there. I love my family with my entire heart, soul, being. Anybody who knows me knows I love my family. I love my family, especially my family back home. Love them. But there was one year when I went back home and my nickname was Fat Girl.
Hello, that was my nickname too.
Understand. And when I look back at the pictures, I'm like, yo, I was literally a one on a slate. Like, what are we talking about?
It's so funny. That was my nickname too. I was probably like 11 years old. Fat Girl. And you just start feeling like, damn.
Like, you don't see how she rolling down the road? Watch how she bam rolling.
Another thing that I want to talk about now that you're talking about bam bam rolling, because you and I have had different conversations. When you're talking about how, I don't know if it was people in your family or in your community when they would say you're younger and they say like your walk was too womanish. That's like a next shame thing too, no?
There's a lot of shame on, particularly around women, thicker women who have a certain body shape. Like even when we think, like, I know we had this conversation before, but things like back in the day, I remember my great grandmother, may she rest in peace, when I think my auntie told me this story that when she saw her period, they beat her.
Because she turned into a woman too fast or something?
Because her seeing her period meant she was being fast.
Oh, saw the grandmother's period.
Yeah, when she saw her period, like let me say that not in Grenadian terms. When she started her period.
Okay.
They beat her because they're like, you're too fast. Imagine your body's literally doing what your body's supposed to do and you're being shamed and told that something's wrong with you, you're too fast, you're too womanish because you literally had your period.
No, I did understand what you were saying the first time. I understood that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
you know what's so crazy is sometimes we don't even realize the ways that we carry shame long term. Until there's something that happens, and then you start to realize, wait a minute, I've been carrying this since I was a little girl, and I didn't even know.
Yeah, something as simple as a period. Like just the other day, I saw a video of this woman, black woman, her daughter. She was throwing a party for her daughter's periodversary, and I thought that was so beautiful, because when I think about like periods as a child, like it's always when you're going to the bathroom, you put the pad on.
Hiding.
I'm gonna tell my kids straight up, don't hide it. What are you hiding?
I hid from my nana for the longest time. I didn't tell her, and she was like, why didn't you tell me? I had shame. I felt like it was a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like I didn't understand what was happening.
Yeah.
And it's because nobody's ever talking about it. So it's like these things like sex and stuff like that people are never having conversations about. There's like this idea that like it's bad.
It's interesting though, because they're not having conversations, but they're communicating about it. Because if they weren't communicating about it, you wouldn't feel shame.
Wow.
Right? Think about it. If it's something that, okay, nobody's spoken to me about it, and I just don't know anything about it, you wouldn't feel shame. You maybe feel like, oh, I don't know about this, but something has been communicated about it that has caused you to feel shame, right? Whether that may be the way you hear them talking to the aunties about somebody who see their period, or the way you hear them talking about some girl down the road. All of that stuff leads to shame. And then you internalize it, because if they're talking about that girl like that, imagine what they're going to say about me. And so they don't even have to talk to you about it for you to feel that shame. You automatically feel it. A lot of things we feel shame about, we've actually never had conversations about them. Because the thing is, and it's so interesting, I was talking to someone about this, just like a situation that had happened where I felt like someone was trying to use a truth of mine to shame me. And I said straight up, I said, you can't use anything that I brought into light to shame me, because baby, it's already out there. You can't shame me about something that I've already put out there. And so when we have those conversations, you're removing the shame when you unhide the thing.
That's what my mom says too. And I think I told her when you said that, and she was like, yeah, I guess that's why, like, a lot of times in my life, certain issues and stuff, it was never like anything, because I've always just been like, yo, this is what's going on, this is what's happening at home, like this is what it is, like this is what it is, versus what we're used to seeing, which is like hush hush. Like I remember my mentor, she wanted to start a YouTube channel. Maybe it would have been like 15 years ago now. But her mom was like, hell no, you're not putting our business out there. Absolutely not. Because she was going to go on YouTube and be vulnerable and be like, this is my relationship with my mom. Like, this is what's happening. And her mom was like, absolutely the F not. So it's like, even sometimes when people try to like let go of that and be whatever, like the shame police come right down and they're like, no.
Yeah. And it's interesting, because that leads me to think about the ways in which stories are lost. And as I mentioned earlier, like our history shows us why we show up the way we do, right? The history of my life tells a story about why I show up the way I do, why I have shame around certain things, why I get angry, why I get triggered. The history of your life tells your story. And if we're not hearing the stories of our parents, our grandparents, to understand why they parented us the way we did, and then we took on those things, like we're missing pieces of our part of us when we don't hear those stories, and everything is hush 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 hush, and we don't hear those stories, and then we're dealing with certain things and we're like, yo, what is this? And we don't have any context for it. And that's a part of what can gravely impact our mental health, right? Is when we're going through things and we don't have context for it. And that's why I believe culture and, you know, storytelling, I'm very much a storytelling type of girl, whether that be through dance, music, whatever. You know, when we listen to Calypso music, they're literally telling stories about politics in Calypso music. Like, I feel like storytelling is such an important part of mental health, because it gives us context for the things that we're seeing and experiencing. And you don't feel like you're the only one, or this is out of context.
And that's a quote that I saw the other day, as somebody was saying, like, a lot of us think that we are the exception.
Yeah.
No, you're not. There's so many other people that have that same or very similar experience, but a lot of times we're hiding.
Yeah.
And we want to stay closed off. And that brings me to the other point and things that we've had conversations about like community and the power of healing and community. I know you recently started your Sisterhoods in Healing group. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I would love for you to talk a little bit about your Sisterhoods in Healing group, because I know that sometimes some women have like hurt around female relationships, and they're like, you know, I'm not friends with any other women. And I've been like that before. You know me. I've been like that before. And, you know, we had a conversation that made me realize like, yo, I need to do a better job with my women friendships. And it's not to say that I didn't have them at the time, but before, I used to be like, like I'm only when I was in high school, like, I'm only friends with guys, like girls are still whatever. And that's only toxic guys. But there's something that's really special when specifically Black women get together and we just get it. Like it's so, I don't know, but talk about sisterhood and healing, because that's exactly what that is.
Ooh, I'm gonna try not to get emotional because my makeup, like, period.
I didn't know we just cry.
One thing about me, I have tears for days. But no, Sisters in Healing is like, I don't know. It's so funny. The last time we were talking, we were in.
It was just like an idea.
In each other's presence was just an idea. But essentially, Sisters in Healing was inspired by the book Sisterhood Heals by Dr. Joy Harden Bradford, where she talks about the healing power of sisterhood and community. And I was reading the book and I was just like, as you said, I was getting tingles. And I was like, wow, like, you know, like I was reading the book, I was like, there's so many beautiful things about sisterhood and also so many difficult things about sisterhood. And as you mentioned, like I grew up hearing, I have 3 sisters, so sisterhood has always been important to me because my dad always pushed like you are your sister's keeper, like you guys are all you have. So like I've always known that sisterhood is important, and like he also grew up in like a community in Suttis, St. Patrick's, in Grenada. He grew up in a community where he was raised by his great grandmother, and he saw her, you know, she going down by she sister house to get an egg or whatever, and they were very communal, and so he kind of used that as a blueprint to be like, this is how I need y'all to be. Y'all need to be close. So sisterhood has always been important to me, but I recognize, as you mentioned, that for some people they would say things like, oh, girls are just too much drama, blah, blah, blah. And so, and also the truth is that a lot of that stuff is passed down, right? When we, you know, speak to aunties about women and they're like, girl, don't trust her, don't trust them, these women and them, don't trust them, they go take your man, all sorts of things, right? And so those narratives are passed down. And I thought that it would be important for us to not only have conversations about the beautiful things about sisterhood, because that's great, and I feel like we've taken that up a lot, but I think we also need to talk about the difficult things about sisterhood. And so Sisters in Healing is an opportunity for a group of women. There's 12 of us all together. So there's 12 women have registered, and me and my best friend of 16 years are co-facilitating. She's also a psychotherapist and social worker. And we're just really going through like, what are our beliefs about sisterhood? Where do those beliefs come from? You know, how do we show up in sisterhood? How can we show up better in sisterhood? What has hindered us both historically from, you know, the women in our lives, and like our own historical stories has hindered us from showing up healthier in women friendships. And the goal is that at the end, not only do they have like a new set of sisters, but they also are able to show up better for themselves and for their sisters, and able to give their sisters more grace and have healthier sisterhood.
That just warmed up my heart. Like, it didn't give me the full tingles, but like I felt
it's a little ting, not a tingle.
Yeah, it's just a ting. Give me a ting. That is so nice and so incredible to hear. And I love the way that you're very intentional about sharing the stories and like curating community. And I know people kind of throw the word safe spaces around a lot, but like, you're actually doing that, you know? And it's so nice to watch it go from just like an idea in a conversation to like actually happening. And I know it's going to have like a lifelong impact on these women. Yeah. Amen. And I'm excited to watch you continue to serve the community. Now I have tingles. I'm excited to watch you continue to serve the community in the capacity that you do, because I always say like, I can see that you're doing ministry with your work. Ooh. And your work goes, oh my God, full tingles. Your work goes beyond like just what, you know, people would see on social media. Like I've gotten to experience a little bit of like what you actually do, and like the resonance is felt. You know what I mean? So I would vouch for Breanna Chanelle Therapeutic Services all day.
Gosh, thank you.
Every
endorsement.
Any time, any place. Hello, you're sitting on right here. That's an endorsement in itself. Like, come on. Yeah. So I honestly would encourage anyone who's ever been thinking about having a therapist. Obviously, there's certain due diligence that people need to do when they are choosing a therapist. So I would be glad for you to kind of go over that. Yeah. Like, what are the things that we need to look out for when we're choosing our therapist? Like, obviously, there's going to be the aspect of like, listening to your intuition, following your heart. But like, what else should we be looking at or asking them in interviews or whatever that process looks like?
Yeah, I love that. I think, to be honest, intuition is one of the biggest pieces. I know people kind of like intuition, but I think that when I say that, I mean like you need to feel comfortable sharing with that person, right? And if you don't feel comfortable, then you're not going to share, or you're going to feel shame while sharing, right? And so, of course, speaking to anybody new, there may be a little bit of hesitance, but I think in your consultation, so the first step to finding a therapist would be, looking for a therapist. You can use Psychology Today. There's also an amazing resource called the Black Therapist List, which has a list of Black therapists. And so those are two sources that you can use, but you basically would book consultations. Consultations are usually free. They should be free. And it's an opportunity for you to kind of ask questions, get to know the therapist a little bit, and really kind of get a feel of like, do I feel comfortable speaking to this person, right? And so I think one of the main things is really that, like that, what you spoke about, like intuition, and asking yourself, like, do I feel comfortable here? And if you don't, it doesn't mean that the person's a bad therapist. It just may mean that they're not the therapist for you, and that's very okay. One of the other things, of course, making sure that the person's licensed, like whatever regulatory body they use. So I'm a social worker, so you would look me up and registered as an under Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. People who specifically go to school for like psychotherapy have another board that they report to, but making sure that they're registered. And then I would also ask them, like, how do you like run your sessions? Like, if you are somebody who feels like I need more structure, asking them like, this is how I work, like, do you offer this? If you're someone that's like, I really like takeaways, are you going to offer me tools that I can take away and practice? Like, kind of asking. I think one of the things is asking yourself, what do you need from a therapist?
Okay.
And then literally asking them, like, so can you do this for me? Right. And I feel like a lot of times when people go into consultations, they're always nervous. And I always tell people who, like, one of my taglines when I'm in consultations is, if anybody should be nervous, it's me, because you're hiring me. Right. So you don't need to feel nervous here. I need to feel nervous because I'm the one that's serving you. Right. And I think that's one of the things I'm very, very mindful of, is that, like, to break up this power indifference and this power dynamic, where people see therapists as these all-knowing beings. If you are on my Instagram, I be going through it. I be living life, and I am human. And I tell my clients all the time, any pedestal that you have me on, take me off right now. Because I am not all-knowing. I just happen to have education that can help me to support you. But you're the expert in your life. So we're doing this together.
Listen, guys, this is going to be a shorter episode because the timing of things kind of so. But if you want to get in touch with Breanna for a free consultation, or you want to follow her on social media, where can we do that, Breanna?
Yeah, so my therapy practice is on Instagram at breannachanelle.therapy. I also have a website, breannachanelle.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Breanna Chanelle Therapeutic Services. I'm on Facebook, Breanna Chanelle Therapeutic Services. My personal Instagram, which, like, I'm a therapist, but I own a practice. So there's the practice, and then there's me as a therapist. And so I'm also on Instagram, Breanna Chanelle _. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, I only have good things to say about the things that I've seen. And I'm really proud of you with what you did with Sisters in Healing. And not only that, but just the way that you continue to show up for Black women, Caribbean women. And I want to thank you for that. Yeah. It means a lot, because you do like work with like youth and stuff too. I remember you shared a story of one of your clients where it was like she was getting her hair braided or something, and you guys still had like your session or whatever, and her mom knew that you would understand. So it's like little things like that, that people don't even think about, where it's like how we show up in service and like understanding and like how much it matters. So thank you for your service.
Thank you for having me on Inuit Blood.
I know, I'm sad it had to be a short episode. We kind of bumped with the timing, but I'll have you back. Come back as much as you want. The community needs as much healing as it can get, so.
I agree.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Love you.
Love you too.